here we are. The Devil is a Liar. Honestly, one of the episodes I was the most excited to watch when it was originally teased to us way back when, but unfortunately myself and a lot of others were extremely dissatisfied with this episode for many reasons, which really is a shame, because this episode is absolutely filled to the brim with potential and fascinating ideas, yet pretty much all of them are squandered by the end. Seriously, even ignoring the inherently interesting idea for the villain for a second, how on earth has Doctor Who finally done an episode with the Beatles, yet still manages to mess it up this badly? Honestly, I don't even want to waste your time with preamble for this review. Let's just review the incredibly disappointing and underwhelming Devil's Liar. So similarly to The Giggle, this episode opens in the past in 1925. And also similarly to The Giggle, I have to immediately praise the presentation of Maestro throughout this story. Jinx Monsoon gives an absolutely brilliant performance throughout, and she absolutely steals the show in any scene that she's in. While loads of my friends are familiar with her work and were excited to see her in Doctor Who, I can't lie, I made it no secret that I was a bit cautious about it, purely because I didn't even know she could act or not. I may have met more DJ drag queens than you could possibly imagine, but that doesn't mean I'm at all familiar with any famous drag queens. And damn, honestly, I have never been more happy to be proven wrong about thinking that this was just stunt casting to get more attention on the show. Because holy moly what a performance this is, with so much range and dimension. Consider me impressed. The drip is also immaculate, by the way. And also, similarly to the Toymaker, her threat and presence is set up immediately, extremely well in this story, with her brutally taking the music out of Timothy and laughing the whole time as she does, as if this was just such a nothing thing to do. And I do also like that this story further sets up the pantheon of gods and foreshadows their return with the Harbingers on Earth. This was a detail I hadn't picked up on my first watch of the story, and it does make the twist in the Legend of Ruby Sunday work quite effectively, even if that story is utter However, the one thing that does detract from this scene is Maestro's first line.
Get away from him. Them. What?
Me.
What?
I'm them.
Now obviously, gender identity is a very important part of life, and people's pronouns, especially those of a trans person, are important to get correct, but I honestly don't know what the relevance of this in the story is. Like, don't get me wrong, this is nowhere near as bad as Russell's performative, shoehorned in bullshit scene in The Star Beast, and this is significantly better, especially since Maestro is clearly using this as an opportunity to mock the character.
You're who?
You're who?
But I don't know, man, if I was in his position writing this story, I would have just not included this line, since it feels like a forced out bit of exposition, since in no conceivable reality does Jinx Monsoon look or sound like a man in any way. You know, since she isn't one. It was pointed out to me by the Dragon Warrior himself that it seems like Russell was going for a joke here about gender expectations and stereotypes, like this line in the awful Series 10 finale.
Bit flexible on the whole like man-woman thing then.
We're the most civilized civilization in the universe. We're billions of years beyond your petty human obsession with gender and its associated stereotypes.
But here, the execution is completely dilapidated for the reasons I just pointed out, making the scene feel a bit unnatural, and honestly it would have been more effective had he called her like a creature or a being or a thing or anything other than him, because it just completely took me out of the moment here. But also, that being said, this scene is literally like 7 seconds, so like it doesn't really matter. And it also doesn't actively make established intelligent characters seem like morons, so who cares really? Also, Maestro playing the Doctor Who theme on the piano was brilliant. And then it goes into the title sequence?
I like that.
And it even plays on the jukebox in the TARDIS after? Just saying though, you should have had the balls to do it the whole way. We all remember how insanely cold it was when the 12th Doctor did this in Series 9. So we see the Doctor and Ruby discuss where they want to go before they go and get the right clothes for the time. And I do like that there is some foreshadowing in the scene with the TARDIS not landing properly, as we notice it doesn't make the noise and the time rotor doesn't move. Now I will have a massive long ass tirade about the TARDIS in my review of Empire of Death, because the missed potential with this story arc is so blatantly obvious and staring you in the face that you'd think that Russell missed out on this potential and made it as stupid as possible on purpose. So for now, to further amplify the rage, I'll mention and praise every time they do this, because it does work effectively and has been set up since Wild Blue Yonder. As of yet, still the only good episode in this era. So they change clothes and the Doctor looks like the goat but wham, and Ruby looks like... oh my god. So the Doctor and Ronda Rousey's nickname in WWE go to Abbey Road Studios, and here we see a nice clever way in which Ruby manages to get them to sneak in, by saying they'll take over from this lady pushing around a tea-cart. And saying that Janet said that they could take over, it's just a nice little clever moment. Nice little clever moments like this from characters was something that was so sorely missed for a long time in this show. And as bad as the show still is, unfortunately, I'm glad we at least got the feeling of it being Doctor Who back, instead of feeling like whatever this is supposed to be.
What's wrong? Check sound.
We then get a pretty funny scene of the Beatles playing this absolutely awful song about a dog called Fred, which isn't only hilarious but sets up what we already know Maestro has been doing since 1925 in a natural way, which has taken all the musical talent from the world, which is a super interesting concept. I can't wait to get more on that. We then get these really fascinating and effective scenes where the Doctor and Ruby talk to the Beatles about music, and these scenes are brilliant. Seeing two of the most influential musicians in history badmouth and talk about music as if it means nothing to them, and they're ashamed to even be doing it, hits really hard and works masterfully well at establishing the bleak tone of the world this story is setting up so far. Even as someone whose knowledge on the Beatles is essentially that they wrote a song about a Simpson submarine and that Ringo Starr is the voice of my childhood,
Disaster lay ahead.
these scenes hit hard, and the actors playing the Beatles here did a fantastic job in the scene. The way you can see the emotion behind their eyes, desperate to get out and show off what they have to offer the world of music, but they just can't because it's not socially acceptable anymore, and you can tell it's killing them. And Murray's somber and subtle music really elevates this scene excellently, really selling you on the dire and depressing world that Earth has become without any music. And it's even further amplified by how the whole room just stops and stares at Paul McCartney in shame and disgust for singing for a second. And seeing the less controversial of the two Beatles here lash out and shout at the Doctor in such an uncharacteristically mean way really shows off how much of an effect Maestro has had on the world with what they've done, and it's really great.
Do you know what you are with your ideas, pal? Disgusting. You are disgusting.
I mean, damn man, relax bro, he was just asking a question. Complete nitpick here, but this seems like a more fitting reaction for John Lennon to have had, considering how much of a notoriously horrible person he was, but I mean, Doctor Who always scrubs away all of Britain's past misdeeds and acts. The show really does like to act as if Britain never had any issues in the past. But let's not go there because this is Funny Music episode. And speaking of music, I found it really effective that besides this scene and music actually played on instruments, this episode's up until this point has been basically silent since they left the TARDIS and got here. New Who becoming so over-reliant on music in the last 12 years or so has actually played a really good key part in this story, since you notice the lack of it and it immediately tells you that something's off. Really good attention to detail here. So the Doctor and Ruby go up to the roof.
I mean, can you dance without music?
I mean, you can, but you want to?
And the Doctor then mentions that in 1963 London, the first Doctor, yes, the first Doctor, lives here with Susan. And this scene with retrospect of the finale is kind of annoying, and just seems very random. I do like that they set up the Susan twist in this story, because honestly, I was one of the few people who completely did not see Sutek coming, and did just think it was going to be Susan Foreman. But now knowing that that goes absolutely nowhere just makes this, like, seem a bit off and a bit of filler. As if for years, like literally years, almost as long as the show has been going, have people not been dying for a story with the return of Susan, considering the Doctor did just never go back for her. And this is the first time she's ever been properly mentioned out loud in New Who, and it was ultimately just here to pull the wool over our eyes.
Fuck you! I ain't having that shit!
Also, some of the lines in this scene are bizarre.
You've got children.
I did have, I will have.
I'll save that one for the finale. But this?
Time Lords were murdered. Genocide rolled across time and space like a great big cellular explosion. Maybe it killed her too.
Excuse me, but what the fuck? What do you mean you don't know if Susan is alive or not? That is fucking ridiculous! Are you seriously trying to tell me that the entire time between the Time War and Gallifrey being saved, that the Doctor not once tried to look for Susan? Be fucking for real! Even if the finale does give a good reason as to why he never went to look for her and doesn't mention her, it's fucking absurd to imply that not once did he ever even think about looking for her and doesn't even know if she's actually alive or not. How could he not know this?
The Daleks survived. Maybe some of your people did too.
I know. In here. Feels like there's no one.
Then how are we going to find him?
I'll know him. The moment I see him. Time Lords always do.
You said there weren't any other Time Lords left.
There aren't no Time Lords left anywhere in the universe, but the universe isn't where we're going.
And even after the Doctor saved all of Gallifrey, did it not once occur to him that Susan could have survived the Time War and could still be alive on Gallifrey? Surely he would just be able to know that, considering those two lines I just showed before. And undoubtedly there'll be way more lines like that I've just forgotten. Also, as if the Doctor hadn't just said to Ruby in the previous awful story that the Time Lords were wiped out, and yet it needs to be re-established here. And once again, for some reason the Doctor just softly laughs after Ruby gives him a hug. I've recorded the first 3 reviews of this back to back, so I'm losing my mind saying this again, but I get that the point of the 60th was to take away the Doctor's burden. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have to act upset knowing that all of his people are fucking dead. You carrot top, zany, incompetent sprout.
You were not meant to
have deep and meaningful character depth.
That was not my fault! Not your fault!
So Ruby, for some reason, doesn't question that the Doctor was stalking her in a club, and she plays a beautiful piece on the piano. It's a very nice scene. However, all the scenes with these over-the-top extras do detract from it a bit, because they are indeed very cringe. Especially this old man who looks like a cartoonishly exaggerated version of Mr. Dursley from Harry Potter. And as if everyone on the planet will react exactly the same to music, considering how hated it is in this version of the world.
Can't bear whistling, Doc. All those horrible tunes. No thanks.
Hell, that just applies to the real world itself as well. I know as a fact that my favourite song ever is a song that almost all of my friends don't like, because it's not their style of music. And no, before you ask, it's not the Doctor Who theme, and it's not Captain Jack's theme. Remember that old meme? Oh, good times. So the episode's real goat emerges from the piano and laughs like the toy maker. And I do like that this immediately boosts all of the threat and tension that the villain has. Not as if they didn't have enough already, but the fact the Doctor is so scared and goes to run and hide, something this character almost never does in a situation like this.
We've got to hide!
You never hide!
Oh, well, never mind. There goes all the subtlety there. Taking clear inspiration from the giggle, I see.
Don't I go back to the TARDIS? Go back to the TARDIS.
You never tell me to do that.
Also, how does Ruby know this trait of the Doctor? I guess we'll soon see, but I hope it's not any contrived bullshit or anything, because that would be absolutely ridiculous. Now wouldn't it? We then get a brilliant sequence in which the Doctor uses the Sonic to outtune Maestro's tuning fork, so they can temporarily escape. And this is actually a fairly creative use of the Sonic. Considering it's called the Sonic Screwdriver, is this the first time we've seen it actually be used to disrupt sound waves? It definitely feels like it's the first time in a long time it's been used for anything sound related. Unfortunately, this is preceded by a moment of huge contrivance, as one of the people who were listening to Ruby play the piano just so happens to have a piano herself, and decides to start playing it. Even ignoring the insane coincidental contrived time that this happens at, the sequence of this old woman being killed looks absolutely fucking awful, and it is so distracting. And it's very apparent when watching because so far this era has been the best that Doctor Who has ever looked. Seriously, the increased budget has done wonders for this show, and hiring actually competent directors, for the most part, has been such a breath of fresh air after years of terrible directing, acting, music, cinematography, post-production, color correction, editing, and the specials in Series 14 have been a joy to watch in the visual department. But for some ungodly reason, mostly just in Series 14 as the specials didn't have this, the show is still struggling with the editing at points. The episode I refuse to call by name was awfully put together the second they went to the floor below, and this scene here for some reason, instead of just cutting after this cool shot, shows us this ridiculous shot of this old woman slowly walking backwards while Maestro walks towards her, then closes the blinds and winks at the camera. Ignoring how annoying these stupid yet to be explained fourth wall breaks are, why would you show this? Not only does it look goofy as shit and take away 1,000 of Maestro's aura points, it just doesn't make sense. As if this septuagenarian decrepit old fart could stand up fast enough to escape Maestro's attack. This is just so stupid, you absolute rinsable donut! Much better. And I'm not even paid by the BBC or Disney. We then get the scene which reinforces how Bi-Generation is an unexplained mess, and this scene to me highlights the problem with 15 so far. Obviously this could all change in the future, but at the minute it sucks how his proper third story ever is making him look so weak. I have no problems with the Doctor being outmatched by an opponent, but this early into a run, having him be so scared of a villain that he starts fucking crying again, just makes him lose so much aura. 15 has almost everything it takes to be a good Doctor. Great performances, charisma out of this world, brilliant lines here and there, and an excellent display of compassion, and usually excellent displays of bravery. But so far, there is just no depth to this Doctor at all. There's something seriously missing, and making him look so weak before he's even had a proper established character is not helping at all. This Doctor has no depth at all as of yet. And this wasn't an issue for the 14th Doctor because obviously David Tennant has played the character before.
He also didn't cry every 5 seconds.
And still, I gotta reinforce how the Torme and Half line really doesn't work, because both Doctors are completely fine. They both act how the Doctor would normally act all of the time, so the line really has no weight to it at all. It's so superfluous. Speaking of problems with the Doctor and the word superfluous, Russell does something in the next scene which is so damaging and detrimental that it ruins the Doctor's and Ruby's chance at character development completely. And what makes this even worse is that I don't even think he did this on purpose, because it's almost never recognised or brought up after this scene, yet the damage is already done, and the damage is astronomical.
So when is it for you back home? What time are you? June 2024?
It's hard to keep track, but yeah, I think so. June, July?
Yes, you did hear that correctly. Despite acting literally no different to how they have in their previous 2 stories, and despite the previous 2 stories just insisting that they're already best friends, despite having spent barely any time together, the very next fucking episode says that they've been traveling together for 6 months. What the fuck were you thinking, man? Why on earth would you skip 6 months of character development? What? Could you just not be bothered to naturally write in some interesting confliction between the two? Did you think it would save time, considering that for some ill-advised dumbass reason, this series only has 8 episodes instead of at least 10 like we had before? Which, first of all, is a fucking pathetic amount of episodes for serialized television, and fourth, that still is not an excuse to skip development for your characters, or in this case, just not develop them and force them to act like best friends immediately, which upon rewatch of this series is really fucking apparent and makes their dynamic feel so forced and fake. While they are enjoyable to watch on the surface, if you really think about it, there is nothing to their relationship as of yet. Second, consider that literally almost every new Who companion has way more character than Ruby does in their first appearance alone. Rose, Mickey, Jackie, Jack, Martha, Donna, Wilf, Rory, River, even Clara in the Snowmen to some extent, even if she was insufferable, and even Amy in Series 5, the series where I don't even like her character. But the reason I don't like her, it's not because she's not a character, it's just because she's an unlikable one. Not because she's just nothing. Almost every single other Doctor that has ever existed had so much more depth to them from their first appearance alone compared to 15.
Look, if I did forget some kid called Mickey...
Yeah, it's not a
it's
kid.
because I'm busy trying to save the life of every stupid ape blundering about on top of this planet, all right?
All right?
Yes, it is.
No second chances. I'm that sort of a man.
By the ancient rites of combat, I forbid you to scavenge here for the rest of time. And when you go back to the stars and tell others of this planet, when you talk of the Earth, then make sure that you tell them this. It is defended.
I'm the Doctor. I'm a time traveler. Everything I told you 12 years ago is true. I'm real. If you don't let me go right now, everything you've ever known is over.
This is over. Are you capable of admitting that? Those people down there, they're never small to me. Don't make assumptions about how far I will go to protect them, because I've already come a very long way.
And the same goes for the companions as well, since most of their first stories are focusing on establishing their characters, and this informs us of what their relationship with the Doctor will be like. This series has no excuse, and like I said before, to make this even worse, I don't even think Russell did this on purpose. I think he was just trying to be clever by taking Ruby to the time at which the episode was the present. Like the time the episode came out. This is honestly one of this series' biggest failures, and the issue is presented arguably at its worst in this story because of this line.
What'd you do that for? Stupid ape!
So the Doctor unfortunately takes Ruby to 2024, and we do then get a brilliant moment where the Doctor shows Ruby what happens if they don't stop Maestro, taking some great inspiration from the Pyramids of Mars. The only good inspiration from the Pyramids of Mars that this series has to offer. And while I do really like Ruby's reaction to the devastation here, I feel like this story really doesn't delve into it much. Considering how many great scenes are in this show from the companions seeing devastation, giving us some amazing character drama, Ruby does underreact to this considerably, especially given how the story actually ends, considering these absolutely enormous stakes. And the stakes are then raised even further when Maestro shows up and reveals that they want to wipe out multiple planets' populations so that they can hear the sound of nuclear winter, and because of all the musical talent in the world, feeds them. Which honestly, it's just such a great motivation for a villain, and do I dare say, I find this concept way more interesting than the toy makers. And it does also help that Maestro isn't just the Sim Master, but with more power. And I gotta say, more than usual, Jinx Monsoon's performance in this scene is fucking brilliant! The way she changes her voice to exemplify certain lines make the Maestro terrifying to watch here, made all the better for our character's reaction to them being absolutely terrified.
Daddy was so bad to me.
And then to transform these harsh lines into a playful song, this is how you do a wacky, insane villain properly, and not whatever bullshit Chibnall was going for with the worst master ever put to screen.
Not gone, darling. Hush.
So it's established that Maestro can be defeated the same way they came into reality, playing the right notes on the piano. Strange that they would just tell the Doctor this. Bizarre. And if this story ends the way I think it'll end, we're about to have a resolution as bad as the one in The Giggle. While yes, it does make sense, that doesn't mean it's not lame as fuck. So Maestro starts fucking with the TARDIS, so the Doctor takes them back to 1963, and we get more foreshadowing for the TARDIS being fucked. Yay! And the Doctor tries to find the right notes on John Lennon's guitar, and we get a really brilliant bit of production here, where Ruby gets taken by Maestro because the Doctor doesn't realise the music being played isn't non-diegetic, which is just a little fantastic moment, almost implying that almost all New Who music plays in the Doctor's head is an interesting thought. Because even if this does only happen with some incarnations, watching a scene and thinking that the music is just coming from the Doctor's head is a great thought. You could totally imagine Mr. God Complex hearing this when he dies.
I don't want to go.
Wow, the Sonic has never looked more like a gun than it does in this scene here. How hilariously ironic.
But she's the only human left with music in her heart!
Would like to take notes while I take totes of the marijuana smoke.
So Maestro starts trying to take the musical talent out of Ruby, and we get yet another retroactively ruined scene because of the bullshit finale. This whole scene sets up that there is something extremely wrong with Ruby, and that there's a hidden song within her soul. Now this alone would work brilliantly for setting up something deeper to happen down the line, but because we know that that doesn't happen, not only does this scene make literally no sense whatsoever, it's just pointless. And, well, you know me, this fucking bullshit pisses me off to no end. Why even bother setting up these mysteries to keep the audience engaged when ultimately it's just a red herring for something that doesn't even matter and makes scenes like this not work and not make any sense? Why did you start writing like this? And it gets even worse when Maestro waffles on about Sutekh being there on the night of Ruby's birth, because this bullshit we would obviously assume would be the person in the cloak that they're talking about, but was actually just this stupid dog strapped to the TARDIS.
This creature is very wrong.
She's literally just a normal lass, by the way. We then get the most predictable possible ending to this story, when the Doctor and Maestro have a
music battle.
Oh dear. And this is where Doctor Who loses its balance on the fine line of camp and cringe. Now I won't lie, I fucking love camp in Doctor Who. It's as much a part of the show's identity as being goofy as fuck, the TARDIS and the Doctor. But the most difficult thing about writing camp stuff is that it can very easily become cringe. Like, Jinx Monsoon's camp over-the-top performance has been absolutely superb throughout this story, but it very easily could become cringe if one thing said sounded lame or a delivery was off. And that line right there? My god, if I've had facepalmed any harder, I'd be fucking dead. So two actors who very obviously cannot play musical instruments have a music battle. Why they didn't just have a sing-off is a mystery to me, since both of them can actually sing, Millie Gibson included, but whatever. This cringe shite with these stupid looking music notes flying everywhere was clearly a much better way to resolve this story. Now wasn't it?
Genius.
Oh, I would never call myself that, Maestro.
Well, there's no reason to start telling fibs now, is there?
Oh, Lumic, you're a clever man. I'd call you a genius, except I'm the room.
That thing, toss it in your hand and catch it, please.
Okay, yeah,
that's about the right weight.
About?
Okay, it's exactly 6.732217 kilograms. I was trying not to show off.
So we get some admittedly great lines from the Doctor when he talks about having lived and lost so much that he can find where the chords are. So he inevitably finds the lost chord, before inevitably not finding the last one. And it seems like Maestro has won. Be for real though, there's less than 10 minutes left. As fucking if.
Dead giveaway.
Dead giveaway. Dead giveaway. Dead giveaway.
So Maestro whips away the piano and traps the Doctor and Ruby in some instruments. I hope that doesn't have any dire consequences since they literally had no reason to do this considering they have the power of a god and the Doctor and Ruby have already lost. Okay.
Breathe, man.
Literally air holes, by the way. So after more fanwang baiting for the one who waits, that's Maestro defeated. And all I can say is wow. What an absolute fucking letdown that ended up being. Seriously, considering how brilliantly the first half of this story set up this dire world without any music, and the threat and presence of this amazing villain, I don't think they actually could have been defeated in a more lame way if Russell actively tried to make this bad. Two omnipotent gods, two generational show-stealing performances, built up for over 40 minutes each. The entire world is shown to have been affected twice now, defeated in the lamest way possible. The downfall and fall off of Russell T Davies is one that needs to be studied.
One who waits is almost here.
Shut. And despite this episode's world-ending and potentially universe-ending threat just being stopped, the characters are not remotely affected by this in any way and are immediately back to their normal chipper selves right after. Because what the fuck even is character depth anymore? And as if the tonal whiplash couldn't get any more severe, the episode then decides to end on a fucking musical number. Are you serious? Can we cut back to literally 15 minutes ago and remember that Ruby was meant to be completely traumatized by seeing the end of her world, and the Doctor was that fearful for his life that he started crying and was completely dejected until right now? What is even happening anymore? What is this utter pantomime dog shit? Well, I'm glad Murray Gold finally got a much-deserved cameo in the show. That doesn't excuse this absolutely awful song and scene that just completely undermined this entire story. And as if this couldn't get any more cringe, the Doctor and Ruby then dance along Abbey Road while playing piano notes. Truly, genuinely, utterly, fully, irredeemably, piss-washedly, fall-offedly, ridiculously trash! So, that was The Devil's Chord, and unfortunately yet again this is another episode that I used to like that I now realise is just a load of shit. While so far this is definitely the best episode of Series 14, as the first half of the story is actually pretty solid and does build up the villain amazingly, with nice little bits of world building throughout. The Doctor and Ruby's lack of character rears its ugly head again in this story, as they just sort of go along with shit, act like they're best friends despite not knowing each other, and have about as much depth as my wallet. And it also doesn't help that there's no difference between how they act in this episode compared to Space Babies, since apparently there was a fucking 6-month time gap between these two stories for some decrepit reason. Yet the Doctor and Ruby are lame, despite glimpses of good moments and lines here and there. But that being said, this episode is absolutely carried by Jinx Monsoon playing Maestro. My, what a fucking generational performance. Seriously, she commands your attention every second she's on screen. She's thoroughly entertaining and funny, and actually has a real feeling of threat to her. Something so sorely missed in the last two stories, which ultimately made them both feel extremely inconsequential. But even despite her brilliance, the villain is ultimately undermined by the end of the story because of how they're defeated. Not only is a music battle lame as fuck, it was so predictable. If you just hear the words music god, you'd assume that they're defeated in a music battle. And that's exactly what you get, and it's somehow worse than you could have possibly imagined. And as if the villain wasn't undermined enough by how they're defeated, then by that awful tonal whiplash fucking musical number. Shameful. Also, why are the Beatles practically just a non-factor in this story? While the brief on-screen time they have in the first half is pretty good, they basically just feel like plot devices to end the story rather than a crucial part of the plot. Ultimately just wasting the inherently interesting concept of Doctor Who meets the Beatles. Glad we all waited years for this story, only for it to have barely even featured them. Ringo and George don't even get any fucking screen time. While this episode is brimming with potential and loads of creative ideas, which are desperately trying to get out, the poor characterization, key jangling about the finale, stupid resolution, and a sprinkle of contrivance throughout drag this episode down a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. At least the Giggle still had good characterization and a satisfying end for the 14th Doctor. I would literally only ever revisit this episode to see the villain again. And as good as they are, they don't save this garbage. Up next is Boom, a Stephen Moffat episode that I'm actually excited to review and not even to shit on it. To praise it. I know, I couldn't believe it either.
You were not meant to.
Have deep and meaningful character depth.
That was not my fault.
Not your fault.